Welcome to Charging the Agency Frontier. In today's episode, I'll be interviewing Deb Gabor, founder of Soul Marketing, based in Austin, Texas. I'm going to let her tell you more about her consultancy in just a second. And she's not only an agency owner, she's a published author of two best-selling books, Irrational Loyalty and Branding is Sex. Get your customers laid and sell the hell out of anything. Deb, what did I miss? Tell us about your background and what you do at Soul Marketing.
Well, I like to explain that I'm like the spiritual and strategic leader for this organization. I'm the founder of the agency, and I have been running this company from sunny Austin, Texas since 2003. So in addition to being chief cook and bottle wash, I'm also the zookeeper and chief strategist for the organization.
Nice. And you're originally from the Midwest?
I am originally from the Midwest, yes, born in Cincinnati, Ohio, spent some time on the East Coast, went back to the Midwest, and then got to Austin as soon as I could. So I've been here in Austin for about 20 years now.
Awesome. Great place for an agency.
It is a good place for an agency. It's also a really good place to do business in general. Texas is very business friendly, and also Austin, Texas, just because of the growth that's been happening here and the great technology oriented businesses and businesses with technology enabled value propositions. We have great talent to choose from. So I've been able to, build and retain the dream team here at Soul because we have great resources here in Austin.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we're going to dive right in and go into some branding questions. And couldn't think of, somebody better to ask some of these branding questions. And I think this is important to kind of recognize that this is information that's great for the agency audience, because I know there's going to be a lot of agency owners and then principals and leadership tuning into this, but there's also going to be marketers and on more of the brand side of things. So I think for both audiences, hopefully there's some lessons and some of your experience and anecdotes and what you can share. So let's start kind of from the top. How do you define branding and what's your unique POV on branding?
A lot of people think that branding is just like the visual identity for the organization. It's the logo, it's the color schemes, it's your photographic images, typography, just sort of how the brand looks and feels from a visual or sonic or, just kind of experiential perspective. We honestly believe here that a brand is the collective emotional response to your product or service. It's sort of the sum total of your brand identity, which is all of those things that I just talked about, married with your brand image, which is the part that your customers own. And so I always explain to my clients and I explain to other agency owners that we work with that the idea of branding is making sure that the construct of the brand identity and the brand image match. And so, we do that by helping brands define what are their beliefs and values and what is it that they want to broadcast to the world, because those beliefs and values are designed to attract an audience which shares the same. And so the process of branding is really about strategically identifying, like, who are you for? And what do you stand for? And who are the people that you're for? And what specific values and beliefs among those people do you align with? And what do you do above and beyond what other people do that differentiates you in a singular way that allows you to attract the kind of people that you want who are going to buy from you again and again and again? And so when I explain branding, I usually explain it in that very strategic way. And, just as a shortcut, I always say your brand is about them. It's not about you. And so that's kind of our unique point of view on branding is that, if you think about it as this construct that is the brand identity, which is the part that you own, and the brand image, that is the part that your audience owns, the process of branding is making sure that those two things match.
What are some of the pitfalls that you see in marketing programs that aren't anchored strategically with a strong brand foundation?
I think I can answer this by just, pointing out maybe some of the missteps that we've seen in the last couple of years with branding. One of them that comes to the top of my head is, I think about a couple of years ago, Pepsi ran this ad campaign, or they tried to run this ad campaign featuring Kendall Jenner against the backdrop of the Black Lives Matter movement. And, they completely whitewashed the whole thing. They put the person who is like the very epitome of white privilege out in front and seemed to suggest that sharing a Pepsi Cola across a line of protesters with police people with, shields and armor holding them back was going to be able to cure all of society's ills. And so, that's an example of when marketing and brand don't necessarily match. You have, there are a variety of these like sort of brand crises that I can think of. That one would be just, being tone deaf. I think that was a campaign that was created internally. It's something where the management of the organization got like way too involved. They're like, ooh, it looks a little bit too gritty. Maybe we need to step back from that. And then, what you get is something that falls with a thud. We also have, what I consider to be like a crisis of leadership. Uber's a great example of an organization that, just can't seem to get it right. And that is something that stemmed, from the top and permeated the entire corporate culture of the organization. No ad campaign can make up for the misgivings of that. Another example would be Wells Fargo's recently gone through a visual rebranding. They dusted off the old Stagecoach, when really the brand repair for that organization has to happen from the inside out, not from the outside in. And so the big mistake that marketers make is that just assuming that a marketing campaign on its own or an ad campaign or, some kind of in-market deliverable is going to fix, what seem to be sort of like internal cultural ills for the organization or the missteps and misgivings of business strategy. So branding is an activity that sort of touches all those things. I like to explain that branding and brand positioning bridges the gap between business strategy and an actual in-market execution and marketing and advertising. So branding could be that bridge. A lot of marketers and a lot of just short-sighted organizations don't see that there needs to be a piece between business strategy and marketing and advertising.
Interesting. What is your role in the process of building a brand?
So as an organization, our role in the process of building a brand is doing like a 360-degree review of what's going on inside and outside an organization's brand. So our role is doing the discovery to understand what is the current perception, who are the ideal customers, what needs are currently being met. If needs are not being met by your brand, where are they being met? What is the white space that you can occupy? What are the attributes that are most important to customers, and how well do you deliver on those things? Or what do you bring to the table that maybe is a nascent need with customers? And so our role is like bringing that information to the table. So conducting that discovery through quantitative and qualitative research, both formally and informally, and then helping organizations make sense of it. And then the most important thing that we actually do in branding before we even create any kind of brand deliverables is to lead the leaders of the organization, both the business leaders as well as the marketing leaders, through a process to align on strategy, align on goals, align on positioning and the brand promise and the brand essence and how you want your customers to experience that brand. And so, the most important role that we serve in that process is facilitating that alignment. And then once we get everybody on the same page, then we create a set of hardworking brand deliverables, which would be things like brand positioning statement, brand promise, brand narrative, character description, the creative brief. And then often that leads into, if it's a new company, it might be the creation of a visual identity, including the logo and the website and all of the deliverables that go with it. If it's not a new company, it might result in some kind of creative refresh, but 100% of the time, it does result in a set of strategic anchoring deliverables that serve as the operating system for marketing and communications going forward.
How can you tell when your client is struggling with the brand problem? What are the telltale signs?
Yeah, I wrote about this in Branding is Sex. I actually think it's in the introductory chapter, and there's just a list of like, here are the top 10 signs of a brand problem. Some of those things, like, you don't even think of as a brand problem, but off the top of my head, one of the signs that there's a brand problem is that you have no idea what your customers think of you. I actually was consulting with a company last Monday, and I brought them some discovery research, and they were just absolutely baffled by that. They had never heard any of this commentary coming back from customers and, frankly, non-customers. Another sign that you have a brand problem is when you're having a difficult time connecting in the sales process, which what you're having a conversation about isn't what's important to customers, just things are not resonating. Another example that you have a brand problem is when everyone at the company is speaking a different language. they're telling a different story about the organization. Everyone is just on a different page, and you have a lot of mixed messages out there. So those are the ones that come to the top of my head. There are a number of other ones, but those are the main ones that when organizations like are really having a hard time just like making these connections, like connecting the dots between customers and their offerings, that usually means that there's a brand problem. Sometimes it means there's a product problem, but if you go through the process of branding, you'll identify specifically what those actual product problems are, and you'll be able to prioritize what the fixes are. And then when you go to market with the repairs to your products or the repairs to your services, you'll have like the brand background for that.
Gotcha. And besides initial brand development, what else should a brand strategist be doing? What should they be working on? Do you have any examples, not related, directly to the creation of a brand, but kind of beyond that?
Yeah, I would say, branding is an always on activity. It's something that you should be thinking about. It's not a one and done kind of thing. And a lot of organizations are in this space of like, we're going to invest in this one time, but we're not going to steward it on an ongoing basis. And so the best brands in the world are the ones that are always in touch with their audiences, both their existing customers as well as customers they're trying to go after. They're trying to understand, what are sort of the changes. What are some of the environmental changes, economic changes? What are the changes in the industry? Who are new entrants? I think of companies like, for instance, BlackBerry, which leaned in really, really hard in creating a device that was just designed to get email, while Apple was developing something that was multimedia with the brand positioning of like giving you access to, all of the information and media in the world in your pocket, like 1,000 songs in your pocket being the original iPod positioning, and then BlackBerry, which was just a more convenient way to get email. And so, the fault of BlackBerry, the reason why they're like trying to recover themselves from, the brand graveyard, was that they did not stay up to date with their customers. So they didn't understand like what were the changes in needs and where was society going and how was the world of work changing. So a brand strategist role in that is keeping their finger on the pulse of what's happening in the industry, what's happening outside the industry, like where are disruptions going to come from, trying to, stay out in front of that stuff and anticipate those kinds of things. Additionally, brand strategists need to be involved intimately in the creation of marketing content, whether that be campaigns or content for marketing automation or email marketing, any kind of interaction that an organization has with its customer or with its publics. Brand strategists need to be involved in that all the time as an ongoing steward of that, but also just to sort of make sure analyzing, testing, measuring, making sure that it's resonating and keeping it fresh and keeping it current, or else they're going to end up in the brand graveyard. So brand strategist role is more than just that ongoing creation. Like at my company, I would say, maybe 40% of the work that we do is in creating new brands and doing brand strategy. Another 20% is in helping organizations really figure out, complex brand problems. Like, for instance, we want to create a new service. I worked with an online grocer on the East Coast before online grocery shopping became sort of like an everyday thing. And they wanted to figure out, like, what does our express delivery model need to look like? So how long are people willing to wait for groceries? What do they want the array and selection to be? How do they want to access that? How do they want it to be delivered? Does it come in a truck? Does it come by a bicycle? How is it packaged? All of those kinds of things. Those are brand strategy problems. So anything that involves a customer is a brand strategy problem. So, my company, we're involved in those kinds of things as well. And then the other 40% of what we do is like we help organizations create and scale content, which is sort of like the delivery of the brand story in a really powerful way that touches customers in market.
Love it. That's helpful. And then talk to me a little bit about marketing advertising agencies bringing on or engaging a brand strategist. So what's the value in that? And then I've been around a lot of agencies, as part of the collective and a matchmaker, obviously. And sometimes, you don't see that brand strategist role at the agency. And then you kind of wonder, what value are they missing out on? What's your perspective on that?
I have a lot of experience like working with agencies, having us do the brand strategy role and then doing like a really, really clean handoff to a very talented creative team at the advertising agency. Engaging a brand strategist helps in a number of ways. I've seen this before just in my own past life, and in folks who work for me who come from an ad agency background. A lot of times you don't have a very complete brief. Anytime you're asking a question about like, who is our customer? What's important to them? What's their lifestyle? Like, what are their hopes, dreams, fears, desires? What is the positioning of this product or this service or this company vis-a-vis competitors? Like, what is our single overriding communication objective here? What's our marketing objective? All of that kind of stuff. Anytime an agency creative or account planner or account executive finds themselves asking that any of those questions, there is space to engage a brand strategist because our job is to answer all of those questions. I also think that brand strategy is great when paired with media. Media planners and buyers are some of the smartest, like unsung heroes of the agency world. When they are armed with like an excellent, very, very detailed strategic brief that includes not just demographics and buying habits, but lifestyle cues, psychographics, attitudes, behaviors of the target audience, it really helps them dial in the program. I always say, like, when you involve brand strategy, it makes the difference between marketing and marketing that sells. And so, we play really well with others, and I love to work with creative agencies. I love to work with them on the brief. There's a misconception that if you work with a strategist or if you work with research, that it can be confining to the creative process. Actually, what we've found is that it's really liberating to have the answers to a lot of these questions in hand so that, you can really be freeform. It helps clients decide. That's like the number one thing. So, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm really involved in like entrepreneurial community. So I'm around a lot of business owners, business leaders, and, like a lot of entrepreneurs like yourself, like me, we have non-diagnosed, non-clinical entrepreneurial ADD, right? Like we're always starting a new thing. So I'm like looking at new brands and new business ideas all the time. And people are showing me logos and campaigns. They're like, do you like this? Does this work? What do you think of this? And I'm like, so where's the brief? Like, what's the strategy? Like, who is your ideal customer? What is it you're trying to do? How are you trying to move them heart, mind, and wallet? And I'll say like 99 and 44, 100% of the time, people don't have an answer to those questions. And so engaging a brand strategist helps you get the answers to those questions because ultimately it helps your client choose. It helps your client feel confident in the choice they've made. And it, ultimately like directs your creative, it directs your marketing, your deliverables, all of the things that happen in market in a way that makes sense for the brand.
I want to talk about cost a little bit because this comes up, from a matchmaking perspective on my side. Sometimes I'm advising around, budgets and what's market rate for this and what kind of scope should I build out for brand strategy and the verbal visual brand, the kind of the whole package. Talk to me, not only, I guess, what brands should expect to pay for branding, but also what agencies should be charging for branding. I mean, what does that look like to you? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I tell people that I generally like don't get out of bed for less than $25,000. Like this is a high value activity. And the real answer to this question is like, it depends. And it depends on a lot of things. The size and stage of the company and whether or not they've ever done any discovery on their own or if they're willing to pursue discovery. So I would say, for a smaller or mid-sized company, you can expect to pay anywhere from like $25,000 up to, $100,000, depending on how much discovery, like quantitative and qualitative research, and specifically what deliverables do you want from that? So if you want a logo to come from that and verbal branding and, the whole brand identity package, it's going to be on the higher side. If you need a website redesign or just like a website reskinning as a result of that, it'll be on the higher end of that. If you have very talented marketers on board on the client side and all they need is sort of an infrastructure piece, which would be, I call this like the brand blueprint, which would be, the brand promise, the brand positioning statement, a messaging architecture and brand platform, like a lexicon of here's how the brand would speak, here's words it would always use, here's words it would never use, that kind of stuff. If that's what they need and they don't need any deliverables, then you can be on the lower end. Now, I work with some of the largest companies in the world who are spending like multiples of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on delivering on their brand, on doing ongoing research and things like that. And so, we're looking at projects. If it's a very complex research project, for instance, where we're trying to figure out like what are the features that a customer would be willing to pay for, that involves like a discrete choice analysis or a conjoint analysis, you're looking at upwards of $50,000 to $150,000 there. I will say that I'm seeing more and more earlier stage companies and smaller companies, even local businesses and solopreneurs and, like mompreneurs and creative types who are trying to create brands have a need for the type of services that we offer. And so, outside of my core agency stuff, I'm doing like this 1-day workshop. It's, the value proposition there is like, be brief, be brilliant, be done, develop the strategic underpinnings of your brand in 1 8-hour day. And I've seen in recent months, like a lot of interest in that. And then that's something that's like $10,000. So, depending on the organization, the type of discovery you need, the type of deliverables you need, you could be looking at anywhere from, $10K all the way up through, $250,000. If you have to get a brand name as part of this, like add naming to this, and then add, the trademark and copyright and intellectual property attorney fees and things like that on top of it. So it can be a very expensive endeavor. It doesn't have to be. And, I would say like the sweet spot for us and the types of companies that I most like to work with are like mid-stage growth companies in dynamic markets, anywhere from like 10 to say $500 million. They're spending on average $50,000 to $75,000 on a brand engagement that includes some discovery. And then, smaller companies, it goes down from there, and then bigger companies goes up from there. I hope that's helpful. I know that's a lot of stuff, and I know that it's not a good answer because this is the question that I get all the time. The answer truly is it depends. But I'll say like if you're an agency person and you're out there like looking at this and thinking about like, oh, am I pricing my services right? This is a very high value activity. I will say I was at South by Southwest 2 weeks ago, and one of the things that I saw that scared the daylights out of me there were at least 3 companies that I saw in the expo who were out there promising to use AI to either create content or create your brand. This scares the daylights out of me, and this should scare the daylights out of everybody who is in any kind of marketing or advertising right now. I don't think that AI will ever deliver on the promise of the strategic impact that a brand strategist or agency resources can provide, because it just doesn't have the power of abstract thought. But the more that people go out there and launch websites that promise to create you a logo and a color scheme and typography and build you an AI-enabled website off of you, entering into your computer like a couple of prompts, answering some questions and things like that, the more that's out there and the less that costs, the more that devalues the entire practice of branding. And so we as agency people know, like, don't, just like when 99 Designs and, all of these other crowdsourcing resources came to the table to do visual identity kind of stuff and whatever, like that devalues the entire practice. This AI thing is coming. It is coming fast. This technology-enabled branding, which basically what they're doing is they're defining branding as visual identity only. It scares the daylights out of me. And, we are working really hard as an organization to stay out in front of that and ensure that, the human element that we bring to this and the strategic insight that we bring, and my 30 years of business experience, which I hate to say that right here, but I have 30 years of business experience, that we bring all of that to bear. We have as two of our core values in our list of core values as an organization. One of them is we do hard things. Like branding is hard and agencies need to fight for it. It is hard work. I've never gone through a strategic branding process where we didn't have people who didn't end up on the same page and then as a result left the company either on their own or they were encouraged to pursue excellence elsewhere, right? Because they weren't on board. Like we do hard things. Like that alignment process is something that AI can never ever do. And then the other core value that I like to highlight is, the core value of use your magic. Like people innately have magic inside of them. And that magic, like the reason I hire them is because they have a particular brand or a particular kind of magic that they bring to the table. And I want them to use that. I want them to bring all of their experience to bear, their unique point of view, because that is how we are going to combat like this oncoming onslaught of technology enabled branding and marketing and advertising and marketing deliverables and things like that. If you're not scared, you should be. Like, this is the thing that keeps me up at night, and it should keep everyone else up at night. It's going to really, really devalue our business if we can't stay out in front of it.
Sounds like your next book.
I know, right? Doesn't it? Yeah. So it's funny, when I write books, they kind of write themselves. Does sound like it does sound like a book, doesn't it?
All right, last question. We want to be respectful of your time, the audience's time, but what's the best way to sell in the idea of branding to your client if you're an agency? And also, I guess, if you're a marketer inside of a brand, particularly maybe with small and mid-sized companies, trying to sell the idea of branding investment. What are your ideas, strategies there?
I'm a big fan of strategic and consultative selling that results in like surfacing a little pain first. And so earlier on in our conversation, we talked about like, what are some of the signs that you have a brand problem? I advise marketers, and I help clients sell this in all the time. I help agencies sell this in all the time. And generally, I do that by asking questions that I know that the leadership of the organization or the seniors in the company are struggling with answering. And so, if you go back to those questions of do we actually know what our customers think of us? Like, do we know what our brand perception is? Or, how well are we connecting in the sales process? And what are people saying that resonates? And what are people saying that doesn't resonate? And why are things not resonating? Turning those things into questions to ask the organization to, sort of highlight, here's a blank space where we don't actually have information we need to go forward. I think that that's a really good way to sell it in. Another good way, I've had a number of people like write to me and say, I need your help in selling this in. What do you think is the best way to do that? I sometimes send them to, I'm like, go get a copy of Branding is Sex, which is basically like a how-to book. And, sort of using the allegories and stories of business, both my own as well as other people's and other agencies, it like kind of explains like, here are the problems. And oftentimes, highlighting like, here are the problems and here's a potential solution to this. I think that that's helpful. And then I think that the final way, and this is really like selling any kind of service here, is to like really focus on branding, not as a one-time activity, but focus on it as something that will inform all of the other marketing. Like anytime you have marketing that you're not sure if it's working or not, and you don't know why, a lot of that can be addressed by going through the strategic branding process. And so, positioning it as a way to say like, as a marketer inside an organization to say, I want to eliminate waste in the organization. I want to ensure a higher ROI for our marketing. I want to market with pinpoint accuracy to the right people and move them in the right way. I want to ensure that we remain differentiated sustainably, so that we can stave off our competition and any changes that are going on. Like using branding as a strategic exercise that's going to get everybody on the same page and align everybody is a really good way to sell that in. And then I'll say, like, if anybody needs help doing that, I invite them, like, write to me, call me, whatever. I can give you some talking points. Usually it's pretty diagnostic. I can usually ask a couple of questions, and then I can give you a couple of methods that you can use to be able to sell it in.
Awesome. So speaking of, how can people reach you following the show if they want to reach out and connect with you, visit your website, stuff like that? And then also your book, Irrational Loyalty, how do they get a hold of a copy? Where can they find that?
Sure. So a couple ways to get in touch with me. You can always reach our company, which is Soul Marketing, soul like the sun in Spanish. That's soulmarketing.com. If you want to reach me directly, you can just write to me at debgabor.com. It's pretty easy. You can also go to debgabor.com. If you hit that website, debgabor.com, there's like a little pop-up there where you can download a free chapter of Irrational Loyalty if you want to preview it before buying it. And then Irrational Loyalty is available currently online in all the places where you want to buy books, mostly Amazon, Barnes & Noble, places like that. I had to hurry up and get this book done. We went into production 6 weeks early on the book because I had an opportunity to launch it at South by Southwest, which was totally worth it, by the way. And so we don't have it yet in bookstores, but you can get both the Kindle version as well as the hard copy book from Amazon or barnesandnoble.com and other online booksellers. But definitely, if you want to just have a preview, I think that the preview chapter is an introductory chapter, which really just sort of talks about, how the world of branding has changed as a result of, really, this is not a political statement, this is a marketing statement, but, the election that brought us President Donald Trump in 2016, changed marketing forever and changed branding forever. And so, this book really just talks about how do we create these conditions where customers are so irrationally bonded to brands that they would feel like they were cheating on it were they to choose an alternative. And so the book, tells the story of many, many brands, some of which have damaged their brands and shot themselves in the foot. Some brands that are able to endure all kinds of crises and turmoil and things like that. And what's the difference between those? So debgabor.com, that's probably the best way to reach me. But if you're interested, an agency person, you want to partner with us, then hit us up at soulmarketing.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Deb. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. This was fun. I appreciate it.